This is Lindsay Betzendahl here again with another Figma plus Tableau short video. This time on organizing your design files, how to kind of create and edit files, and some best practices that I've learned over time. This is particular if you're doing a lot of prototyping in Tableau, maybe either personally or with an organization, and there's definitely some best practices and tips that I'd like to share about how to best go about doing that. So let's get started. So first, for those, maybe don't know, or just to remind people, the way Figma is organized is that you can create projects. And so in this case, I have a project called presentations. And within that project, you can have multiple design files or FigJam files. You'll see here that there's 3 files, and when you hover over them, they'll tell you what the name of each of those files is, and then they'll show a little thumbnail, which usually is just the first page, or is the first page within that design file. Then you have pages, so you have a project, you can have multiple files, and then within each file, you can have multiple pages. And then even within, obviously, each page, you can have multiple frames, groups, layers, etc. So there's a lot of ways to kind of organize all these different pieces or layers of, of a project. So if you're using Figma for Tableau prototyping, or any type of prototyping really, you probably want to do it with this type of organizational structure, but this is really going to depend on your company's process, your process with how you guys work through the prototyping phase of, development. So for me, I'm often at the project level is the client that I'm working on. And then within that, the file name is going to be the project name. So this is because oftentimes we may work with one client on multiple different projects, different dashboard development. So I try to keep each individual project or dashboard development process into one file, all under the same project of the client name. Now within each file, there are different ways that you can organize, the file itself in terms of how you're developing your dashboard. Or again, like if some other type of development, some organizations who are developing like applications will do this a different way. So you could do it based on the phase of the project. For example, maybe it's discovery, and that's where you're maybe slapping in some images, some inspiration, some thoughts and notes and comments about what the final product might look like. The second part might be lo-fi wireframes, right, where you kind of just are sketching a little bit in Figma, getting some ideas on the page, some metrics, maybe some how many dashboards there might be. And then perhaps, it's high fidelity, then QA, then, final prototype, what have you. You could also organize those pages by dashboards. This is more if each dashboard within a suite are not necessarily like connected, like there's no drill path between them, because otherwise you may want them together on the same page for when you do prototyping and interactive, connections. But if they're separate, or you're having multiple people work on individual dashboards within an entire project that you're going to be delivering, you could have each dashboard as a page, and that way, people can be working on things at the same time, perhaps. You could also do it by iterations. So I've at times had a report development that I'm working on that maybe, let's say it has 6 dashboards in it. But there may be some big changes that happen, every couple weeks, and I don't want to lose what I did before. So I'll duplicate the page and maybe write a date and say, hey, these were the designs or where we're at as of, X date. And then the next one would be, kind of the newer ones we're working on. And that way I kind of have a paper trail of some of the older designs in case we ever go back to them, because sometimes clients circle back around with prior design ideas. And lastly, it could be like parts. So that means you can keep all of your components or variants on a page, right? Things you might need, icons, stuff like that. So those are on kind of separate pages than perhaps the designs you're actually working on. And you can organize your file that way as well. And I'm sure there's infinite other ways to do it. So another thing in terms of organization is naming your pages, and or your files. So a lot of people who use Figma use emojis to name their pages, and it kind of just keeps track of, a quick look at the page, what it might be, as you see on the right, like research, Scratchpad, and UI, prototype, and QA, yay, all done, right? And then you could also do things to identify not only just the phase, but also maybe other things like who's working on it. Maybe you all have, everyone in your group has a different emoji icon, and then that's like who's working on which page, or perhaps, again, as you see in the top, maybe things that are like, these ones are ready, these ones are editing, these ones don't look anymore, they're old, right? So those are other ways to just give clear indications to people of, where you're at in the process and which design files or pages are the ones to utilize. So I mentioned a little earlier, the first page in your file becomes the thumbnail. So for a long time, really long time, I just let this be the case. And sometimes I would move the most, the best looking page to the front so that you saw something that was decent versus all my chicken scratch. But there's another way to do this that is much cleaner and looks a lot better. So you can do two things. You can either make the first page in your file the cover. You can literally just call it cover and create, whatever you want. Or within a page, you can right click on a particular frame that you have in there and say set as thumbnail. And then that will become the thumbnail that shows up in the front. Thing to know is that thumbnails are a particular size. I forget off the top of my head, but so this may not always look the best if you do a thumbnail from the page, if you're just using, some frame that you already have. But you can also just create one in the file that you're in and set it as thumbnail. One of the cool things about this is you can, whichever way you do it, whether it's the first page that you use as the cover or you set a thumbnail, either way, one of the cool things is that you can obviously change it. So this allows maybe a team, when you're looking at all these files, to, you could write in like your name that you're working on it. It's in progress. It's finished. These are the final designs. What stage you're in, needing feedback, whatever. Like all these things can be written in right on this thumbnail to help keep not only you and your company organized, but also alert people to, where you're at or what you need. So I've been asked a lot about how to best kind of edit files, particularly when you're working with a team. So, for me, I don't necessarily prefer people to edit my designs, without telling me or something. So there's other ways that you can do that, particularly if someone really needs to make a change right away and you're not available. How can you do that with retaining that old information and, not overwriting something you've done? So you can obviously duplicate an entire page by right-clicking and selecting duplicate the page. And then you can make that edits to that one. You can also duplicate frames, which I do more frequently within a design, is I will duplicate the frame. You can click Alt-Drag on a Mac to copy it, and then just rename the old one with maybe a date or something. And that way I can make some changes. And this is often if a client wants to see how something might look, if I have to change the layout, but I know that they're not totally convinced yet that that's the direction they want to go. So I want to keep both options so that they can see them. Another thing is sometimes you need to get feedback. And so you can either, duplicate a page that you provide the link to those who are going to give feedback and allow them to make comments for that. And that's really helpful that people can make comments. You can respond back. You can check things off as complete. And you can keep track of all these, which is really great for making the edits that someone else wants. So I already mentioned the duplicate frames thing and the comments, but you can also use sticky notes, which is a plugin that you can download from the community, and you can use those. Those are pretty convenient for folks to, just make comments like right on, a dashboard prototype. This is also helpful too. I use these a lot when I'm on a call and I want to write down what needs to change, but I don't want to change it while I'm on the call. I'll use this little sticky note right on the view, write these things down, and then change them later. Or if something's not quite done, I'll use these as well sometimes so that when I take an image of the dashboard prototype, the client sees like, hey, I haven't done this yet, or this is still an outstanding question. So the sticky notes are great for that because you can see them on the view versus the comments is more of a interactive feature that people are going in and commenting on each other's, notes. The last thing about kind of editing and duplication is that there is a version history. Now, I've used this more than once. If someone changes something, or if you need to go back to a prior state of the design, you can go to File, Show Version History, and then it'll show up on the right, and you'll see all the autosaves. Now, it's worth knowing it doesn't do it. It obviously does it every so often, and I'm not entirely sure. It looks like maybe it's, at least the two that I see there, like 30 minutes apart, but I'm not exactly sure how often it's autosaving. So it's something to be aware of. Obviously, Figma is a web-based tool, so it's not something you're frequently not just pressing save, although you can do that. You can do File, Save to Version History, which is basically the same thing as saving it. To be honest, I actually never use that because I just bank on the version history. But just know that that's there. You can always restore an old version, or you can also go into it and then copy something within it, close out, and then paste it into your current version. So you don't have to restore the whole thing if there's just something that you needed to get back. And that's it on kind of organizing and editing your design files. I hope that was helpful and gets you on the track to, continue to make great Tableau prototypes in Figma. Thanks.